Hello everybody, welcome. Decided to do a video today on why I went the digital route instead of being a long time tube guy. So, and maybe why you should go digital too. Got my coffee here, a little cat on it, showing his butt. Just got off the treadmill today, feeling strong, hope you are too. So, why I went digital and maybe why you should too. So I'll start out by talking a little bit about my background. I was a long-time tube amp user. The first major amp that I used when I was young was a PV5152, and I used that for years and years. And I also had, a Crank Revolution that I bought brand new. I had Marshalls back then. And just to put all this in perspective, like when I first started gigging with a band called Contradiction back in the day, I would bring 4 Marshall 412s to shows at bars, and it was absolutely adorable and ridiculous. But, you get older, you get wiser, and you do tend to get lazier. So as the years went on, my rigs kept getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And so 412s, 412s became 1412 or 2, down to 212s, and even 112. I had a 112 PV Valve King that was just awesome. Used it for rehearsals and used it for gigs, and it was great. Pick it up with one hand. It was fantastic. But after all this time of using tubes, you kind of get tired of the inconveniences and the issues. Like I've already said, they're super heavy, hard to transport. The maintenance cost over time. I was gigging a lot back then. I would probably play 3 weekends a month, and I would do 2 night shows, and I practiced almost every day. Well, you play that much and you put that many hours into on a set of tubes, and they're going to wear out in like a year or two. So maintenance cost just sucks over time. And I always felt that the sound would kind of change from show to show, and even from the beginning of the night to the end of the night. The amp might sound one way, when you fire it up, and then, after 3 hours of banging on it, by the end of the night, it sounds probably the way you want it to sound it, and then you fire it up the next day after it's been sitting around and sounds completely different. I got tired of the time consuming setup time, because I would run at least one amp, sometimes 2, and I would have a full pedal board run in 4-cable method, and I would also use I had a 4-space rack that had my wireless, a tuner, noise gate, and a lot of times I would use a BBE sonic maximizer. So had one of those. And then tap dancing on pedals. I mean, I didn't know anything about amp switchers or pedal switchers at the time. Didn't know if such things like existed if you weren't big time, if you didn't have a Bradshaw rig. So maybe those things weren't as common in the early 2000s. So the tap dancing thing on pedals just sucked. Trying to get from a nice, delicious, clean sound with a lot of chorus and reverb to maybe something heavier, big Metallica sound, you had to step on a few things to make those changes happen. And then, you go from bar to bar, you have noise and grounding issues and all that stuff. And, there was no information about all this stuff, or even about miking cabinets. I'd ask guys advice, guys that have been playing for 20, 30 years, how do you mic a cab? What's the right way to do it? And I would just get these blank stares. Nobody really knew. Everybody was just sort of guessing. So way before YouTube, way before we were properly educated on all this stuff. Now we just take it for granted. So time went on. Early 2010s, YouTube starts happening, and we get a look into these big professional rigs. We're starting to learn more things. And when it first got on my radar, I saw I think it was a rig rundown, Premier Guitar rig rundown of Chris Broderick, and he was playing with Megadeth at the time. And this probably would have been, I don't know, late 2000s, and he was using an Axe-Fx Ultra, and he ran through a bunch of his tones, and I thought, wow, that sounds really, really good. Like, yeah, you might be able to tell if you're really listening that it sounded maybe a little bit digital, but that XFX Ultra, it was the gateway. That's when things were really, really starting to happen. So a few more years goes by. My rigs have been getting smaller. And in 2017, I was going to become a dad. And so I knew I had to start changing my workflow. I used to practice guitars at home at live volume. I'd have a PA sitting here with two single 15 monitors, powered monitors, and I would crank up the amps and practice at gig volume. And that's just what I was used to. Well, if you've got little kids in the house and they're taking a nap, you can't be doing that. So I thought, oh man, I gotta change things up a little bit. And I was just getting sick of moving all the shit around from gig to gig. So I was starting to look for solutions, and we were still planning on gigging. And so the idea of using plugins or something on a computer was kind of right out. I knew I needed a piece of hardware. And I wasn't sure exactly how it was going to work out, but I've always been in bands that owns their own PA, and we always had big monitors on stage, and so I knew that I probably didn't even need to start bringing an amp to gigs anymore because we had plenty of power on stage if we needed it, and of course you can always get in-ears and all that stuff. So we had always had our own PA, monitors on stage, stage volume not really an issue. So I started doing a little bit of research. And at the time, kind of your big four for modeling was XFX, Kemper, the Line 6 Helix, which was pretty new. I think it came out in 2015. And then back then, for those of you guys that remember, they also had the Positive Grid bias head, which was kind of a flop, I think. Sounded good, but didn't quite hold up compared to the rest of the units. So actually, Ola England did a really great video on comparing the AX8, the Kemper, the Line 6 Helix, and the bias head, Positive Grid bias head, comparing them to a Mesa Mark II C+. And right there, like, I knew, like, all these units sound great. It doesn't really matter which one you buy. It's just whichever one works for you. Like, that's it. Like, they all sound good. And even to this day, like, they all sound freaking great. So as far as I was concerned, like, the genie was out of the bottle, you know, for gear. Like, you get one of these all-in-one units with 1,000 different amps and effects and everything. Like, that's the only way you can compete with some of these pros of the world that have access to everything. I'll never own all this stuff. But you buy one box for $1,600, you have everything, every tool you could ever need. So I thought that was just the coolest thing in the world. So the reason I decided to go with the Line 6 Helix, compared to the AX8 and everything, it had more I's and O's, more ins and outs compared to some of the competition out there. Because I wasn't quite positive if I was still going to bring an amp or not. I wasn't quite sure if I was going to do 4-cable method or how this thing was going to integrate into my system. I thought Line 6 Helix was incredibly flexible. You could do about anything with that I's and O's. And I loved the user interface. I ended up watching a couple of videos, and, you know, it seemed super easy to use. You know, the touch foot switches, being able to assign everything right away, kind of instant access. I thought it was great. I'm not a personal big fan of the touch screen thing, like the Headrush or the new one that Fender came out with. I think it's kind of diddly having to drag and drop things with your finger, and, you know, what if something happens with that screen? What if it gets scratched? What if it quits working? Then are you kind of out of luck? I don't know. I just felt the Line 6. It's a nice, robust design. It's held up well, and I'm still a fan. Still a fan. So I've been using it for 7 years, been using Helix for 7 years, and I can honestly count the number of times I've had to bust out an amplifier on one hand. And it's only for, like, jam sessions or parties where maybe there might not be a whole lot of PA. You know, we're not using our own PA. We don't have that much sound reinforcement, and I just need my guitar just to be loud and to keep up with the drummer, and I don't know what's going to be there. Then an amp's fine. But in every other case, if I'm practicing with my band here at home or if we're out doing a gig, I bring the Helix all the time. All the time. I think it's just fantastic. So, should you go digital? I would say if you can't get over the idea of not having an amp in the room, like if you need that pants flapping energy behind you, then a modeler's not for you. A modeler is supposed to sound like an album. And it does. They all do a great job of it. They all do a fantastic job. So for me, all of the benefits, the overall portability, the cost, and my setup is so quick. One line in, one line out. I just run mono. I'm not fancy or nothing. Just run mono out to the board, and I'm done. I mean, my idea of cable management is just have less cables. So easy peasy, one and done. Get out of here. So I hope you enjoy this video. Maybe you learn something. Maybe it'll help you pull the trigger, go out and make the jump to digital. But I think it's great, and I'll never go back. So. Have a good one, folks. Take it easy.